No pressure, Hilda. No pressure.
My name is Hilda. I'm an alcoholic. And when Yolanda was doing the intro, I was thinking, wow, I thought I was speaking tonight. I wonder who she's got. Oh, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. And, wow, this has been really a fun conference. The speakers have been fantastic, with Reno John kicking us off, and Rinell with the Al-Anon. What a great Al-Anon talk. I'm a great fan of Al-Anon. Did wonders for me mum. And let's see, of course, my friend Tammy, who just killed it. If you didn't get to hear her last night, it's amazing. I could have done without her setting the bar that high, but you know. And of course, Gail with the history, and Bill. Oh my God, if you haven't done the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, you are really missing out, because it's why we're here, you know, and it's super exciting to me, anyway. And the committee, Joe and Rich especially, and anybody else who had something to do with me being here, I really love Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you get a chance, please get something from Lee's tapes, even if it's not my talk, anybody's. When I was in early sobriety, I have to tell you, the speaker tapes are what got me through. I got sober in the middle of nowhere, and they're just fantastic to pass on, even if you're not going to listen to them. And let's see, Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we were outside over here last night, and this fellow was standing there, and I thought he was one of us, you know. So I was like, antisocial much? You know. And he goes, no, not at all. He said, he begins to tell us all about, you know, he's bringing his daughter here, and she gets to experience the hotel, and he really only lives over the road. And he goes, oh, you're here for a conference. What conference is it? I said, Alcoholics Anonymous. And he goes, you're kidding, right? I said, no, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. He goes, oh my God, I just had a beer. I was like, I said, well, unless you ended up naked after the night, we're probably not going to recruit you, you know. And I want to thank Julie for coming with me. Julie looks at him and goes, you've got the bar all to yourself, you lucky bastard, you know. You just can't make this stuff up, you know what I mean? So I will tell you, I'm born in London, England. I start with that because I forgot to say that once when I was speaking, I think in Oklahoma. And in the thank you line, this fella says to me, does everybody in Los Angeles speak like you do? I said, yes, they do. So it'll save you wondering as you go, you know. But I was born in London. I grew up in a pub. I really did. It was my grandparents' pub, and I'm an only child and an only grandchild. And only children, we're really good at entertaining ourselves. You know, I mean, for me, my playground was the cellar, and I loved it. You know, I used to line the whiskey bottles up on one side and the vodka bottles on the other, and I'd have the whiskey bottles chatting to the vodka bottles. They'd be chatting to me, and I'd be chatting to them, you know, and whiskey was the bad guys and vodka was the good guys, you know. And the only sad part about that is it was still happening in my 20s, you know, but I loved it. I loved everything about booze long before I ever took a drink. You know, I liked the colors and the fancy bottles and the, you know, snazzy labels, and I just thought it was fantastic. And my granddad's pub was in the shape of a kind of a U, with two bars at the front on the street row with a little hallway between them, and then the kitchen and the long bar out the back. And between the kitchen and the long bar was like an alleyway. And the two bars in the front, one was called the front bar, in the front, and the other was called the cocktail lounge. And the long bar was where older people would go and nurse like a whiskey all day. You know what I mean? And the cocktail bar was where people went in after work and had a couple of drinks and went home. And even little, neither of those made sense to me. Do you know what I mean? I'd watch them and think, what is going on here? But the long bar had life. The long bar was where it was happening, and my bedroom window was above the kitchen, and it looked straight down into the long bar. And that's where they had the discos and the pool tournaments and the darts tournaments, and fights would break out, and the police would come, and from my bedroom window, it was better than telly. You know what I mean? It was fantastic. I loved it. And, you know, one night, at the time in England, they had this thing called lock-in. And I'm really going to have to ask you to turn your phones off. I hate to be that speaker, but I'm too ADD for that. Because, you know, it keeps going off, and I'm like, a child abduction? What's going on? Who was it? You know, what color's the car? Does anybody know? You know, sorry. Anyway, a little too ADD. So they had lock-in in England, and what would happen is, like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, they would lock the pub, and everybody got kicked out except the regulars. And the regulars would stay, and my granddad would turn the lights down a little bit, and they'd turn the jukebox down, and they would play cribbage and drink until my granddad wanted to go to bed. And I would watch them from my bedroom window, and it was like magic. You know, I thought, God, I just wanted to be part of that, you know what I mean? And I snuck down one night, and I didn't know how old I was, but I know my pajamas still had feet in them. You know those pajamas? And my granddad flagged me in, and he put me up on a bar stool, and he gave me a baby sham. And at the time, baby sham came in a little bottle, and I think it's a sparkling wine or something, but it came in a little bottle, and I was a little person, and the logo was this cartoon deer kind of leaping, you know, and he put it in a little glass, and I had arrived, you know. To this day, I can't tell you whether I liked the taste or I didn't like the taste or if I got tipsy or drunk. I have no clue. I just know that that night I got to be part of them. You know, I got to be part of, and I loved it. And, you know, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about me around page 33, and I'm going to paraphrase really badly. But it basically says it doesn't matter how much you drink or how often you drink, it's about what happens when you drink. And that many who are merely potential alcoholics often turn into the real thing, particularly true of women. And I am one of those women. You know, by 16 I had an ulcer, at 17 I got done for drunk driving, at 18 I had a heart attack, and 6 months later I was in my first mental hospital. And that's when drink was working, right? I'm serious, it all went downhill after that, you know. Over the next 3 years, I was in and out of 5 mental hospitals, and the longest I was ever out of a mental hospital was for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I'd gotten my own flat, I had an answering machine, the curtains drawn, a fridge full of Asti Spumante, vodka, and Michelob Light, because I'm a calorie counter too, and you know, for 2 weeks I did not see or speak to another human being, and I was happy. I have a clear memory of standing in the shower, drinking a cold Mick Light, not knowing if it was day or night, not caring, and thinking it just doesn't get any better than this. You know what I mean? But what happened was I got a knock on the door one day, and it was my mum, my shrink, 2 policemen, and 2 nurses. They shot me in the arse with something and put me in a jacket with really long arms. And I came to at the Institute for the Living in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, I thought I was on candid camera, I'd been punked or something. You know, it all seemed a little surreal to me because I found out I'd been committed for a minimum of a year for being a danger to myself and others. Now, I hadn't seen anybody for 2 weeks. I couldn't figure out who the others were. You know, it really bothered me, and anybody who's been in a place like that knows the people in those places are crazy. Now, I have always known that I wasn't quite right? Bubble not quite in the middle. You know, I've never been a full ticket. I don't think I'm ever going to be a full ticket. And quite honestly, I don't think there's a program in the world that will make me a full ticket. What I do know is that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the tools to let me act as if I'm a full ticket. And I'm running with that today, you know. Oh, and congratulations to the chip takers. That's a lot. Well done. So I'm in the Institute for the Living, and my roommate was really obvious what was wrong with her. You know, I mean, she had rage attacks. One minute she'd be fine, and then she'd snap, and she'd start punching out windows and going for nurses. It'd be chaos. And they did this thing called wet packing. So she'd go off, and they would have all these nurses come in. They'd wrap her in cold, wet sheets and toddle her away. Now, she had something I didn't have, and that was friends locally. And her friends used to smuggle money in all the time. So our room always had money hidden in it. So when she'd get toddled away, I'd start thinking. Because I'm a thinker, right? Start thinking, what a waste it is to leave all this money sitting around. Somebody should do something with it. So I went AWOL on her dime. And the first time I went AWOL, I had $50 on me. I ended up in downtown Hartford, and I had no clue what I was going to do. And this little fellow wandered up to me, and he said, "Psst, do you want to buy a ticket to Prince?" Now, I didn't know who Prince was. I am truly an AC/DC Black Sabbath kind of girl. But I'm thinking a dark auditorium. This might work. Right? So I get these tickets, I smuggle in 2 bottles of vodka, I'm sitting in the nosebleed seats, and while he did his little Raspberry Beret thing, I got absolutely legless. And after the concert, I was wandering around Hartford, and I ended up in this park, and these fellas, winos, were sitting around passing a bottle, and I sat down with them. And they kept looking at me like stupid or crazy, but they let me drink with them, and they never said a word. And as dawn came, the white van with the blue letters pulled up, Institute for the Living. And I stood up and said, I gotta go, my ride's here. It's a true story. And these fellas just looked at each other like, yep, crazy. So I get back, I have to build up me little trust points, and anybody who's been institutionalized has an idea about that. And, you know, I was tootling along, and right before my time was coming up, I went AWOL the last time, and this time I had a plan. And I was thinking, okay, Hilda, this time we're going to do this like a lady. We're going to do this properly. And I went into this pizza joint round the corner from the hospital. And I go in, I order a slice of pizza and 2 pitchers of beer. I sit down in the booth and I start pouring it in the glass. And just as I get started, some of the nurses from my unit come in on their break. So now I'm down in the booth with the pitcher up to my mouth, trying to get as much down me before they see me, you know. It's just madness. So when my year came up, I had to go before a board of psychiatrists. And my psychiatrist stood up and said, Hilda will never live in normal society. She is completely incapable. And his recommendation was that I did a minimum of another year. It took me 2.5 months to convince that board to let me out. So I did 14.5 months. And in hindsight, he may have had a point. Because I got out, I moved from Hartford to Hamden, just down the road. I got a little job, and I met a fella, and this fella turned out to be a coke dealer. Now, I had never done coke before. I did not know that it would let you drink longer. Those of you nodding did. I did not. But what happened was, in a relatively short amount of time, I've got this job at $700 a week. I have a coke habit of $1,500 a week, and when you do the math, so I'm on the counter in my kitchen one day. I was drinking Michelob at the time. And I looked out at my flat and realized I had sold everything, including my curtains, for coke. And I thought, Hilda, if you are hanging out with people who will buy your curtains, we have a problem here. Do you know I never did coke again? In fact, I would be in parties and people around me would be doing coke and my head would go, remember the curtains. Now, I think that's what makes me a real alcoholic, because far worse things happen to me drinking than ever happen to me with coke. Never once did my head ever say, don't drink. What it might say is, don't drink red wine because it makes you cry. Stay away from the whiskey because it makes you mean. You know, or my version of chapter 3, switching from scotch to brandy or scotch to randy, but it never actually said don't drink, right? So I'm in Hampden, I get done for drunk driving, drunk and disorderly, indecent exposure, and I think, I never should have left England. It was so much better there. And I moved back to England, and I'm not in England very long, and I get done for drunk driving, drunk and disorderly, indecent exposure, and I think America was so much better. What was I thinking, you know? And really, that's my drinking in a nutshell. It is always going to be better somewhere else, and everywhere I go, there I am. And I have a long list of arrests for indecent exposure. And I know I don't look the type today. Maybe a little. But something happens when you add alcohol to my type of alcoholic. And I know I'm not alone in Alcoholics Anonymous because I have heard plenty of women share. But as soon as you add alcohol to my type of alcoholic, for whatever reason, I just know that you have to see my tits. Now, I tried everything for that not to be true. And I know it's part of my alcoholism because I do not feel the need to show them to you now, right? I just don't, right? So I'm back and forth, and I'm back in England this time, and I'm tending bar with my mate Andy. Andy and I have been great friends for a long time. Andy's birthday was on New Year's Eve, and we started drinking on Christmas Eve, as you do. Now, I have always been a blackout drinker. Some of the other speakers talked about blackout drinking. I've always been a blackout drinker. I used to call it losing time. I was always losing time. I might lose a couple hours, I might lose a couple of days, but I was always losing time. Now, I had assumed that when I had lost time, I had passed out quietly somewhere. I found out on the 3rd of January that that was not true. Because the phone was ringing, and when I answered it, it was Andy. And he asked me if I was ready to pick out rings. And I had no clue what he was talking about. And he said, no, Hilda, not this time. Now, he brought over a video. I'm on this video, and I look great. I look great. I am not slurring my words. I'm not walking funny. It was all these different pubs we were in. All our friends were there. My father was there. I'm watching this video, and Andy went down on one knee, and I thought, dear God, say no. Because I wasn't there. And it was the first time I realized that you didn't know that I didn't know that I wasn't there. You know? So I did what I did best, really. I went to the pub, and I found the guy in the pub that knows everything about everything, right? This guy is in every bar all over the world, right, John? He knows you ask him about what time it is, and he explains exactly how the pendulum clock truly works, right? The most interesting man in the world. So I'm chatting to him, and I'm, poor old me, I'm engaged. I didn't know what to do. And he said, did you know if you volunteer on a kibbutz in Israel, they do 3 meals a day, they do your laundry, and you get 50 quid a week, 50 quid a month. I was like, result. 3 days later, I've got a visa, I'm going to Israel. Now, I'm a good Irish Catholic girl. This all made sense to me. So I went for 3 months, I stayed 9, and I come out of a blackout in a Tel Aviv jail charged with drunk driving. And I didn't remember renting the car. And I can tell you that really horrible things happen to young, vulnerable women who drink like I do in places like that. And I jumped bail, and I ended up in Egypt with the wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time, and really horrible things happen to young, vulnerable women who drink like I do in places like that. And I ended up getting dumped in Cairo, just near the American embassy. I had a tattered T-shirt on, a beat-up pair of shorts, and not another thing to my name. And a big American Marine took pity on me. It was Ramadan, and everything was shut, including the embassy, and him and his mates looked after me until the embassy opened. And I can tell you, I truly believe a non-alcoholic woman who had been through what I had been through would probably never drink again. But I'm a goalpost drinker. I'm one of those drinkers who says, if it gets bad, I move the goalpost back just a little bit. If it gets worse, I move the goalpost back just a little bit more. I got an emergency passport. I wasn't 20 minutes in the air. I thought, hell, they could have killed me. I was drunk when I landed. And I didn't know it was alcoholism. I had no idea what was going on. And the whole 80s for me are like one long blackout with little bits of reality tossed in. And coming to the end of the 80s, I found out I was in a relationship that apparently I had been in for quite a while. You know, it's like the Talking Heads song, Once in a Lifetime, where he goes, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here? You know, it's just like... And my partner was commenting on my drinking, which I just thought was rude. So I moved to Nebraska. I moved in with me mom, and I wasn't with me mom very long, and she started commenting on me drinking. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I thought about my uncle. Now, my uncle had tried to 12-step me when I was 18 in a pub in St. Albans in England. And he was like 9 months sober. He was on fire with Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was buying the beer, so I let him talk, right? And I remember him saying, in Alcoholics Anonymous, you need never drink again. I was 18. I thought, why wouldn't I want to drink? But he could see where I was going. And of course, fast forward, it's all gone horribly wrong. And I thought about him, because he was still sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, my uncle was what I thought a real alcoholic was, right? My uncle went to prison. I only ever went to jail, right? My uncle went to detox centers. I only ever went to mental hospitals. So in my mind, he was what a real alcoholic was, but he was still sober, so I thought I'd give it a go. So I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous on New Year's Eve, 1989. I picked New Year's Eve because I truly believe no real alcoholic would quit drinking on New Year's Eve. I know today, only alcoholics pick a date. Non-alcoholics don't do that. They don't put little red X's on calendars. They don't count days, right? It's like virgins don't go for pregnancy tests. It doesn't happen, right? I didn't know that. So I went to this meeting on New Year's Eve, and it was a little meeting, and they were talking about, He's the Father, we're the children, and I thought I was screwed. Because I know that's not the answer, right? I mean, I've always been a seeker. Israel, please, right? So I can't hear anything else they're saying in the meeting, so I started taking everybody's inventory by their shoes. Because I can't look at you either. And the fella next to me had on the biggest pair of cowboy boots I'd ever seen. And I remember thinking, I wonder if his IQ is any bigger than his boot size. You know, just tearing these people to shreds. And after the meeting, I made a beeline for my car, and this big dumb cowboy followed me out. And he said to me, have you got a big book? I said, of course I have a big book. Doesn't everybody have a big book? Now, I wouldn't have known a big book if you'd beat me to death with it. But I couldn't tell him that, right? But without missing a beat, he went to his truck and he gave me his big book. And it was the first time anybody had seen straight through me. And I was speechless. And I went to get in my car, and this little old woman ran up to me and said, did you know if you go to a lot of meetings and you don't drink in between, you can get drunk? I was like, thank you. I got in my car, I thought, these people are freaks. But something happened when I pulled out of the car park. That little woman's voice was in my head, and I kept thinking, well, she might have a point here. If I went to a lot of meetings and I didn't drink in between, I might stay out of trouble. That's what was attractive to me. That's exactly what I did. I went to a lot of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't drink in between, and my life took off. I was a rocket to stardom in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you any time in here at all, you know who I'm talking about, right? I look good, I sound good, the jobs are coming, the money's getting better, I'm in dry clean only clothes. You know what I mean? But here's the problem. I'm going to meetings 5 minutes late, leaving 5 minutes early, calling it a home group, right? I got a sponsor because people were giving me a hard time about not having one. You know what they're like. So I found the oldest, frailest woman I could find. Because I thought she wouldn't give me a hard time. Yeah, don't do that. She really tried. God love her, she really tried. And I was about, I used to say 3 years sober. I was 3 years without a drink. And she got really, really ill, and she was dying in hospital, and I went to see her. And she said to me, just remember, Hilda, Alcoholics Anonymous will be here for you when you come back. I hadn't drank yet. I had no clue what she was talking about. But she could see exactly where I was going. And of course, she passed away, and I pulled away. I went from 7 meetings a week to 5 to 4, 3, 2 a week, 2 a month, because now I'm busy. And I'm not going to Wednesday night because I can't stand the secretary. I'm not going to Friday night because the same woman shares the same shite every week and I can't listen to her anymore. And now I'm taking AA's inventory. And I'm in Florida on my way to my dream job, the job I had always wanted. My partner had come back because I wasn't drinking. And we were walking on the beach and she turned to me and said, you know what, Hilda, not only do I not like you, I don't love you drunk or sober. And I thought, are you kidding? 3.5 years I haven't had a drink for you, which was my other problem. So I took my now ex again to the airport, and as the plane took off, I walked in the bar. I started with double Jack, because that's how I drink. Started drinking on the Thursday, arrived in Germany on the Sunday, started my new job on the Monday, got done for drunk driving on the Friday, and woke up in a wet bed next to my new boss on Saturday morning. That's my drinking. Glamour drinking. I drank like that for 9 months. And on the morning after what I hope is my last night before, it is my sobriety date, the 20th of July, 1993, I woke up in my own bed, which had become a bonus. I was alone, which was a bigger bonus. But the bed is wet and I'm still dressed from work, and this is my normal. But I went into the bathroom and my hose were all ripped. There was blood all over the bathroom and I had no clue what had happened the night before. And I had a moment. I remember people in Alcoholics Anonymous talking about the hideous 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. I just think, God, you're so dramatic. But that morning I knew who they were, and my heart broke. Not because I can't drink. I drink with the best of them, as I'm sure I would tonight. But that morning I realized I had become unpredictable to me. I did not care when I was unpredictable to you. But that morning I felt it. And I really didn't know what to do. And I called English-speaking AA because I didn't know where else to go. And a fella called Steve Baker answered the phone. And I told him my sad old story. He lets me break his anonymity, by the way. I told him my sad old story. Poor old me, been to AA, screwed it up, whine. And he said something to me I truly believe saved my life. He said, you know, Hilda, the most natural thing in the world for an alcoholic to do is drink. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we do not shoot our wounded. And I believed him. I believed him. It was the only reason I went to a meeting that night was because I thought he understood. So I'm driving over to this meeting in Hoensbroek, Holland, and my head kicks in. My head goes, hang on a minute, Hilda. We don't want anybody to think we're new, right? I don't want anybody to think I didn't know what's going on in here. I mean, I memorized chapter 5. Not just to where it says God could and would, right? Because the rocket stardom thing, you know. Anyway, so I have a plan now. I'm thinking about the meetings in California and Florida, big meetings. And I'm thinking I'll slide in the back, get a little bit of time, and then tell you what happened. I walked into this meeting in Hoensbroek, Holland. There were 7 people in the room for an hour and a half. And nobody was letting me pass, right? I mean, they're all shiny and new. I'm bloated, sweaty, a gash in me face. You know, the vision for you, right? So I had to tell all them my sad old story. Poor old me, been to AA, you know, wine, wine, wine. And afterwards, they were looking for somebody to make the tea and coffee. And I was thinking, wow, I hope they find somebody. It's an important commitment. And this voice from across the room went, Hilda will do it. I was like, Hilda who? This meeting was Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. This was Tuesday night. I said, I didn't know if I'm going to be sober on Thursday. It seemed like a long time to me. And this woman just looked at me and said, if you want to stay sober, you'll make the tea and coffee. Now my head went, who is this psycho bitch and why is she tormenting me? But my mouth went, okay. I had no fight left. If you are new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I hope you're tired. Because I would have done anything that woman suggested, and I tried, because I just didn't know what else to do, you know. And I didn't know if it was the Thursday or the Saturday, but one of the days, the psycho woman caught me again, and she said, I really think you're going to have to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I said, do you see where we are? Hunsbrook, Holland. It's nowhere, hang a left. She goes, oh, I know where we are. But they have a meeting in Dusseldorf on Friday night, and Kaiserslautern on Wednesday, and Dahan on Monday. I was like, I said, I am not driving all over God's acre for a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not happening. She goes, how far did you drive for a drink? Which is so unfair. Because I am that drunk at 2 in the morning looking for anything open, right? So I started tormenting my home group. I had a thing about getting lost. I used to hate to get lost. You know, on the way to job interviews, weddings, my wedding once, if I ever got lost, I would just get a couple of bottles, check into a B&B and call it a day. You know, just that's it. So I started tormenting my home group. On Thursday night, I'd say, I'm driving to Dusseldorf tomorrow night. Does anybody want to go? The guy I hated the most, went, I'll go with you, Hilda. It's like, anybody but you. But every Friday, Mike would come and we would drive an hour and a half to Dusseldorf for an hour and a half's meeting, for an hour's coffee afterwards, and an hour and a half's drive home, and I wanted to kill him the entire time. I have left skid marks on the Autobahn where I pulled over to tell him to get out. But he had about 8 years of sobriety, and he would just laugh. We're going to be late if you don't get going. Like, yeah, just going to kill this guy. I'm grateful today for where I got sober because I learned principles before personalities. If you're part of small town AA, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, I hated my entire home group, but they're all I had, you know. Principles before personalities, you know. I was reading the big book one night, and to this day I can't remember what it was, but it prompted me to call the psycho woman. It was like 2 in the morning. She answered like she was waiting for it, right? It's creepy when they do that. But I said, Sandy, I'm reading this bit in the book, and I think I might need a sponsor. Would you sponsor me? She said, I have been, but thanks for making it official. Got my sponsor, you know. She was good as gold. She dragged me through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I tell you, and I argued and debated everything, you know. We read through the book line by line, page by page. When there was an action to take, we took it. And I was sitting in her kitchen, she was getting coffee. And we're reading the book, and I read this bit, and I said, I know what it says, Sandy, but do you know what it means? And before I could enlighten her, her book came across the kitchen and just missed me. And I said, Jesus, Sandy, what you doing? She goes, no. When we read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we read the black bits. There's nothing in between the lines. What they say is what they mean. And of course, I'm a mumbler, so I'm like, I don't know, I think there's more to it than that, you know. I don't know how she didn't kill me. But I tell you what, she saved my life because one night I was chatting to her and she said, Hilda, I wish you'd remember what Alcoholics Anonymous is and what it isn't. Alcoholics Anonymous is not high school. It is not about being popular or being liked or finding the guy or finding the girl or getting married or getting divorced or getting married or getting divorced. It's not about stopping smoking or starting smoking or stopping swearing or starting swearing. It's not about any of that. Alcoholics Anonymous is about staying sober and helping somebody else do the same. It is that simple. She said, nobody has to like you. You know? If you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous and you think nobody likes you, they may not. But it doesn't matter. We have to help you anyway. So just stay, you know. So I was about 9 months sober, and my company promoted me. They were moving me to Belgium. Belgium! I thought it was just a place on the news. I didn't know people lived there, you know. So I went over to Sandy's, and I said, Sandy, they're sending me to Belgium. She said, what's the problem, Hilda? I said, well, I'm only 9 months sober. I'm not supposed to have any major changes in the first year. She said, I'm really sorry, your company didn't get the memo. Pack your bags. So I moved to Belgium, and I tried duvet therapy when I was in Belgium. I'm sure nobody in Dallas has ever done this. It's when you get home from work, you get under the duvet, you get up the next day and hope everything changed. It doesn't work, but I didn't drink, and I finally called my sponsor, and I told her what was going on, and Sandy said to me, look, I want you to blow the dust off your big book and get your happy little arse 20 minutes up the road to the Brussels group. They meet every night of the week, and when you get there, I want you to share honestly. I was like, whatever. So I go up to the Brussels group, and when I get there, their coffee was like sludge. They had no literature, and when I shared, I told them so. And afterwards, they gave me the literature commitment and took me to coffee. And I learned about putting me hand out again. You know, they really saved me in Brussels. And I was about 14 months sober. I got offered a job in London, and I did it all different. I went over every weekend. I had a home group before I moved. I had a service commitment waiting for me before I got there. People in Alcoholics Anonymous helped me find a flat, and I didn't have to do duvet therapy. And I had heard you talk about doing something different for a different result, and I had no clue what you were talking about until I actually did it. And I was in London, and I met my current wife. 28 years later, we're still together. We have grown up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, that's truly since '94. And so I'm in London, and you know, I've got a job, and I'm tootling along. And we went to the All Ireland convention. And I heard this speaker say, you can do absolutely anything you want in Alcoholics Anonymous if you're willing to do the work and pay the price. And I thought, huh. So I went back to London, I quit my job, I went on the dole, I started applying to universities. I was going to go into a helping profession, going to help people. At 2.5 years sober, I did not know myself well enough to know that I don't like people enough to want to do that. But I didn't know that then. And I was about 4 years sober when I finally got accepted to university. It's hard in England. And I got my first motorcycle and my first tattoo. And 4.5 years sobriety, I had a motorcycle accident, so I got a bigger bike and a bigger tattoo. And 5 years sober, I started my second year at university, and nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous seemed surprised. And I thought it was because they believed in me. And I heard a speaker not that long ago have a similar experience and say it's because people in Alcoholics Anonymous believe in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can do absolutely anything if you're willing to do the work and pay the price. And so I'm tootling along really well. I'm sponsored, I'm sponsoring people, I'm in a relationship, life is good. And I was 6.5 years sober, and I was on my way out the door to go to a convention in the south of England, and the phone rang. And it was my mom. And my mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer. She was living in California. And she asked me if I would come out to California when she had these big operations that were coming up. And I told her I would. And up until that point, I had asked my sponsor, how do I make amends to this woman, my mother? I'm an only child. I tore my mother's heart out. I called her collect from foreign jails, and she could do nothing. And my sponsor kept saying, it's God's time, Hilda, not yours. And when the time is right, you'll know. And I went out to Southern California when she had these operations, and I was there when she woke up, and I was there when she went to sleep. And she was in Huntington Hospital in Pasadena, and the old 202 Club used to be right across the street from the hospital. And when she was sleeping, I went across to meetings, and oddly enough, they say, is it odd or is it God? Oddly enough, because of what I had been doing at university, I got to take my mom home early and nurse her at home. And I was emptying my mom's tubes one day, and she turned to me and said, I don't know how I'll ever repay you. I said, you don't get it. 6.5 years I had waited for that moment when I got to be the daughter she deserved instead of the one she had. My mom and I had a good few years together. Everything has changed. She's in a memory care facility. And I always think about Nancy Reagan when Ronald Reagan passed, and they interviewed her, and she said, his whole career they had talked about how amazing it would be when it was all over and they could sit around and talk about the amazing history that they've been part of. And when they got there, he wasn't there. And I am so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous that my mom had her daughter and knew it for a good few years. Not everybody gets that, and I know it. And I know I'm not doing it perfect with her, but I'm certainly doing my best, Before she went into the place, I work in Georgia, and Julie was in California, and we got a call from the La Crescenta Police Department. I'm jumping around a little bit, and she had been pulled over for dangerous driving, right? And Julie had to go get her, and when I got back from Georgia, I brought her car back over, and she was mortified that the police had called me, And I said to her, Jesus, Mom, all the years the police called you for me, it's going to take a while for those scales to get balanced, And the next week I was over there, and she caught herself being forgetful, And she turned to me and said, I hope you don't have to put me in a mental hospital. Those are some scales I don't want to balance with you either. And I thought, wow, she's quick tonight, But anyway, we were living in England, and my mom had some health issues before all this happened, and we decided we would go live in Southern California for a while. And Southern California changed my entire sobriety. The sponsor I have today, Sharon C., changed everything. Somebody mentioned it yesterday, page 77, to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and people about us. It doesn't say in Alcoholics Anonymous. It says God and the people about us, And I had forgotten that somewhere along the way, and quite honestly, I've never been busier in Alcoholics Anonymous since she's been sponsoring me. It's a good few years now. And for my mom's 60th birthday a few years back, she wanted to go back to Ireland, where she was born and raised. And I said I would take her, and I called my sponsor and said, I'm taking my mom back to Ireland for her 60th birthday. And my sponsor said, remember, this is your mother's trip. I said, yeah, I get it. She goes, no, seriously, Hilda. I said, I know. She goes, okay. So I take my mom, and she shows me where she went to school and where she bought her sweets and, where she caught the bus. And I just wanted to kill myself. And but I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you reminded me that it was my mother's trip, And we were on Bray Mountain one day, and we were overlooking where she played on the beach. And my mom just turned to me and said, you've turned into a lovely young woman. My mom. And, it was amazing in hindsight, So when in 2008, we went back to Ireland to live for a year, and I did not get on well in Ireland, but I'm well trained in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I phoned my sponsor every day. I phoned her every day from Ireland, and finally I said, look, Sharon, I don't know what to do, and she said, I think you need to get on an effing plane. And I went back to Southern California, and we still had to wait for Julie's visa, and we knew it would be okay, you know, we'd figure it out. But I went back to Southern California. I was 15 and a half years sober. I was jobless, penniless, sleeping on my mom's floor. Not where I wanted to be at 15 and a half years of sobriety. And it was dark, and I just couldn't get a job. And I called Sharon one day, and I said, look, Sharon, I just don't know what to do. And she said, hang on a minute, Hilda. Aren't you and your mom watching certain television shows together every week? I said, well, yeah. She goes, aren't you having dinner together a couple of times a week? I said, well, yeah. She goes, don't you think this is another way to make amends to your mother by allowing her to be a mother? I couldn't see it at the time, but I see now she was right. So finally, I got a job, and Julie got back in the country, and we got another job. And in 2011, the job I had, we got a flat and whatever. In 2011, the job I had was going under. So I called my mom. I said, Mom, this company I'm working for is going under. I'm not going to have a job. And she went, you can come live with me. It took my mother 24 hours to realize I had given her bad news. She called me the next day. Oh, Hilda, I'm really sorry about your job. Too late, But that's Alcoholics Anonymous. In 2012, I was up for 2 jobs at the same time, and one was with unmanned drones for the military, and the other was with the Spirit of Giving. Now, if you've had more than a 10-minute conversation with me, you know I am an unmanned drones for the military kind of girl. My sponsor, who's an ex-bong wine drinking hippie, said, oh, I think the Spirit of Giving would be good for you. So I was being a smart arse, and I said, why don't we let God decide? And she said, I think that's a fantastic idea. So I had to take whoever offered me the job first. So I ended up at the Spirit of Giving, with barefoot Fridays and slides from the 2nd floor to the 1st. Let's just say it was an adjustment, right? And they did this thing called one day without shoes, right? So you went a whole day without wearing shoes to bring awareness to people who don't have shoes. And I have a thing about my feet. I don't even own a pair of flip-flops. I'm just closed toe. You don't wear a lot of Birkenstocks in England. And a couple of people I worked with knew I was a little quirky this way, and they said, look, why don't you get your toes painted? You might feel a little less, I was like, all right, so I sneak out at lunchtime the day before, and I go to this nail place, and I go in, and I go, I wonder if I can get a pedicure. And the woman goes, pick a color! I'm picking a color, right? I picked bright red because it was a color, and I'm sitting there putting my feet in this hot water, and I'm thinking, this isn't so bad. I can do this, right? And then they start putting my hands. I'm like, we're not doing the hands. I guess we're doing the hands. Somebody else comes over and goes, head massage. I'm like, stop touching me, It was not a relaxing experience for me. So I'm telling one of my sponsees what happened, right? And my sponsee goes, oh my God, I love getting pedicures. I would have gone with you. And I thought, how great is that my sponsee wanted to be supportive? And she looks at me and she goes, oh no, I was going to see the show. The love of a sponsee. The other thing they did at this company was on your year anniversary, and every 2 years you went to a 3rd world country and you got to put shoes on little kids' feet. And I was in Honduras, and places we went, the kids were, they were direct descendants of the Mayans, and the government didn't acknowledge them, so their schools didn't have electricity, some with very little running water, happiest kids you'll ever meet, And we had a medic with us because these kids' feet were all tore up, And I had a little fella, and his feet were a mess, and the medic took him away, and he started to cry because he didn't think he was going to get his shoes. And my little heart cracked just a little bit because I'm not that girl. And as we were packing up to leave, I saw the little fella in the valley with his new shoes in his hands, give me a wave. And my heart cracked open just a little bit more because I am not that girl. But I am the product of strong sponsorship, and I almost missed it. I almost missed it. I take direction from a woman I respect, but I do not always like, to do things that rarely make sense, right? So in 2014, they did this big reorg, and I was going to lose my job. I lost my job, actually. And everybody who worked for me were like under 30, it's their first jobs, whatever. And as I was leaving with me box, they were coming in from lunch, and they started to cry. And I explained to them, it's just business, it's not personal, and you're going to be fine. And, I get in the car, and I call my sponsor, and I said, I just lost my job. And I told her what happened with my team, that they were so upset, and I had to make them feel better, And my sponsor goes, how amazing, Hilda, that you thought so much about your team. What great growth. I was like, did you miss the part where I lost my job? She always wants that little bit more, So I was interviewing for a job in Vancouver, Canada. I'm going to Canada. And I'd been up and down for interviews 5 or 6 times. I'm so excited. I'm going to Canada. And I'm talking to Sharon one night, and she said, you really should keep interviewing locally. And I said, why? I'm going to Canada. And she goes, just keep interviewing. I was like, all right, I'm going to Canada, So I interviewed with this little company down in Long Beach, really nice people, but I'm going to Canada. And they asked me for a second interview, which is fine, because I'm going to Canada. And on my way home from the second interview, they called me and offered me the job for more money than I had asked for, which had never happened to me in my entire career. So I called Sandy, and I said, Sandy, they've offered me this job. And she goes, what's the problem, Hilda? I said, well, I'm going to Canada. And she goes, I'm sorry, did they offer you the job in Canada? Well, not yet, but they offered you the job in Long Beach. Well, yeah. Goodbye, Hilda. So I started working in Long Beach, and turned out to be a fantastic gig, and then COVID happened. And I lost my job in COVID, and I didn't know what it was like in Texas, but in California they had this big COVID bump on the unemployment. I got a nice severance package. I am settling in on the couch for 5 seasons of Legends of Tomorrow. Right? I'm good. I am getting comfy on the couch. And I got a call from this fella I used to work with in Long Beach who got a job in Georgia. And he called me and said, hey, Hilda, I heard you lost your job. I want you to talk to these people. I think they need you in Georgia. I said, I'm moving to Georgia. He goes, just talk to them. I said, well, I'm not looking for a job. Just talk to them. I'm like, all right, but, So I talked to these people. They're really nice people. They offered me a job. I told them I'm not moving to Georgia. They said, it's okay. Do 2 weeks in California and 2 weeks in Georgia. It'll be fine. I'm there 3 years now, by the way. And all through COVID, I know a lot of people never left their homes and people had a hard time, but all during COVID, I was on planes every 2 weeks to Georgia. And at the time, I don't know what your opinion is on airlines, and please don't share it with me later, but I love Southwest Airlines. I think they're hilarious. And every time I would go Burbank, Las Vegas to Atlanta. And the Las Vegas to Atlanta, they would come over the tannoy and say, there's 36 of us going to Atlanta, spread out. It's like, it was an unusual thing. But anyway, I never read paperwork very much. I'm sure there's nobody else in here like that. But I just didn't. And the night before I was meant to start my job, I realized that I had gotten this title of this job is the title I had worked my entire career for, and I didn't even notice. Because I had worked so hard over the years not to have my ego be tied to my business card. I was just taking jobs because it was interesting and I'm good at what I do and I was enjoying, and it didn't matter what the title was. And here it was, the title I'd always wanted. And then I had that moment, I hope I can do this job, as only we can. And so I'm working in Georgia, and I'm there 2 weeks, which means I'm there on a weekend. And I'm in the office on the weekend, and one of the gals I work with comes in, and her husband brings some food, and we're chatting, and we got around to the fact that they don't drink. And I don't drink. And they're like, really? It's like, yeah. They're like, well, we haven't drank for 5 years. How long have you not drank? I was like, this is going to go bad, you know. So he started talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, and they got sober in something called Saddleback Recovery, which I didn't know what it was. And they didn't know much about Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, they say you may be the only copy of a big book somebody ever sees. I am that for them. And now every lunchtime we go for a walk and we talk about Alcoholics Anonymous because God likes to keep Hilda accountable when she's not in California, you know. But, you know, you just can't make this stuff up. And I was talking at a conference on Zoom, and my sponsor and Carla Rowell and Carl Morris and all these big speakers were talking on the Saturday. And my favorite Al-Anon was talking on the Friday night before me. So Georgia time, I was going to start talking at like 11 o'clock at night. So I thought I was pretty safe. So I said to them, why don't you try this Zoom conference, you know? And so I saw them online for the Al-Anon, and then I thought they went off. And then I did my talk, just like I did my talk tonight. And when I finished, I got a text from this girl saying, oh my God, I can't believe you told everybody that stuff. So I called my sponsor and said, I don't know whether to be happy or mortified, you know, but this is Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, and the bottom line is I came to a lying, bedwetting whore, and somewhere along the way you have turned me into a good friend, a loving and monogamous wife, and a true daughter to my mother, and for that I thank you.
What a miracle.